exciting ham talk. I know I've been missing in action for a couple of months. Unfortunately, we still cannot schedule emergencies, and my county has absolutely been hopping between training schedules. And I actually have had two crashed airplanes in my county in the last month. One of them happened last Thursday, so I was a little busy. So, in case you haven't come on to our show before, I'm going to go ahead and do a round of introductions with hosts. And then this show's a little special because we've got some guests with us today, and we're going to have a little bit different setup than we normally do. So, I'll start with me. I'm Sam Henley, KE0LMY. I usually handle emergency communications, contesting, things like that whenever we do our shows. Next is Miss Melissa.
Hi, everybody. Melissa, KI5ICQ.
And she usually handles the ham cake
Shacks, antennas.
people and everything else that we like to jump into. So don't forget, you guys, you need to submit your ham shacks to Ham Talk so that Miss Melissa can interview you. She is a sweetheart and she loves to interview people, so you better do that. So just drop your information below and Greg will give you information on how to get your pictures and your interview done with Miss Melissa. All right, next we have the beautiful Miss Andrea.
Hello, Andrea, Kilo 2 Echo Zulu.
Okay, I think she genuinely just loves to do that. But the little secret you guys may have missed is that she also does stand-up comedy. So maybe we'll get some zingers from her during this episode. Andrea does a lot of the technical information. She has the Rover, which you guys may already know about. She's quite popular throughout the United States. Where's the next place you're going to be headed, Andrea?
Well, let's see. I don't know where I'm going to operate in the January contest. That's the big one coming up. And who knows? I may get involved with the EME contest at K5QE. There's also the 10 gigahertz contest. I won't get involved in the first part, but who knows? Maybe the second part. But I'll be going to New Jersey in a few weeks. I'll be up there a couple weeks and then probably back to Texas. Oh, who knows where you're going to find me.
And the other thing we often get as a catch up from Andrea is either something on her truck is broken or something on her is broken. So stand by for that information too. Finally, we have a man that runs it all, Mr. Greg.
Hello, everybody. Greg N5XO, and I'm here tonight with everybody. And Andrea, you are going to have Rover at the 6 Meter Barbecue, are you not?
That's in two weekends?
Yeah, the 30th.
I'll consider that a dry run to New Jersey. But right now, Rover's, oh gosh, the last shop that did some work on the transmission, she's not running real well. Although
I still think, you've got this beautiful Bronco. It'd make a great new Rover project.
How long would it take to move everything over to another vehicle? Don't even answer that. It's rhetorical.
Right, a long time. So I'll just keep going with the 380,000 miles and see what I can get out of it. But right now, it's pretty scary looking the way it's been running. I got it running where I'm somewhat comfortable, but running rough at low speeds. High speeds, okay.
Oh, wow. That's actually weird. All right, we also have a number of guests with us. I'm not entirely sure how we're going to introduce all of them, but Greg may have some information on how we're going to get everybody to introduce themselves. Greg, if you want to call out our guests one at a time so that they can give us
I'll do that.
Call and everything.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. We'll let each person introduce themselves, and then we can go ahead and roll into the show tonight. And everything. So anyway, let's go ahead and start with the team. Since I invited JD on here because of the fact that we needed one more person. And not enough people watched the show all the way to the end. So I don't know what that says. JD, come on in and tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm actually with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and I'm here to monitor these people on this podcast. That's my role tonight.
That's okay.
No.
Sam's here as a condition of her parole.
Well, I know that. I'm with the Prison Bureau. So, no, I am here in Granbury, Texas. I live out on the lake, and I have a nice little setup. Greg has been kind of a on again, off again Elmer for me over the years. I think I first talked to you, Greg, in 2012 on 146.52. I was commuting into work and just threw out a call on 46.52, and lo and behold, Greg Lewis N5XO popped up on my radio, and we had a little cross county communication, and that's kind of how I fell into this group of outlaws. So that's what's going on with me.
Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us. Let's go to, let's see, Scott.
Hi, Scott, KE4WMF, also fellow rover with Andrea at a micro level.
I saw your van. It's not a micro level. That's some quality workmanship there.
Well, thank you. Well, by micro, I meant the size of the vehicle itself. It's pretty small compared to
All
everything
right.
else.
That one I'll give you on that. Okay, let's see. And we got Tom.
Yeah, Tom N5GIT in Church, Texas. I do a little bit of VHF, UHF terrestrial contesting and a lot of FT8 work.
That's a bad name around here.
Don't
Okay, a lot
believe
of
him.
digital work.
All right, let's see. We got people are being covered up here, so I can't catch everybody's name. Let's just go back to gallery. Let's see. We got Tom. Bryce. Come on in.
Thanks, Greg. Bryce, Kilo Echo 5, Kilo Foxtrot Delta. Been in San Antonio since about 2011. I think I caught up with you once or twice since then, Greg. Big thing I'm into, obviously HF, VHF, but then do a lot of work in working with the bicycle rides and that sort of stuff, providing support for the MS Society through the Texas 150, the Houston to College Station ride, and then upcoming the Valero MS ride to the river. And then next year we plan to branch out and also work the Dallas and Midland rides. So we'll be pretty busy with that.
Why would anybody want to ride a bike in Midland?
I don't know. And they do it in like July. So why would you ever want to ride a bike in Midland in July?
Yeah, those are hardier people than me.
I'm not riding a bike. I'm following behind them in the truck in the air conditioning.
All right.
Smart man.
And then we've got Eli, probably the youngest in the group and also the newest ham, somebody that's newer than Melissa. Eli, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so ever since I was little, I was always into electronics engineering and doing really just, anything related to technology. But about 2016 is when I decided to start a YouTube channel. It died like in 2020, so I have it actually on Rumble now. But I've always been obsessed with DIY projects, and then I decided to get into ham radio because, it's electronic based, right? And it's communication. It's far more useful than most of the other stuff I've done in the past. So ham radio just seems perfect for an electronics engineer,
Cool.
Well, thanks. All right. We'll get ready to turn it back over to Samantha here. So she can do all of her hosting duties and look important and tell me what to do. Probably one of them is show up on time for the recording.
I saw a comment. I'm sticking by it.
Greg was 10 minutes late.
Was
I'm
it just
gonna
10?
cut it.
But we're not counting.
Hey, I made it from work to here in what's normally a 30-minute drive, and I made it in like 12. So we'll just say the turbos were screaming on the truck.
But never that on open video on YouTube where everybody and their brother see that.
Yeah, I'm doing the math on that. That's 95 miles per hour.
That's
Hey,
okay. They're just Class Cs. If they didn't see them, it didn't happen.
That's right.
Hey, do you actually have like real turbochargers in your engine on your 150 truck?
Yeah, it's twin turbo.
Oh, okay, cool.
So okay.
Which begs the question: are there fake turbos, Elijah? What?
Well, yeah, I mean,
I
like,
like it already.
does Ford actually put real turbochargers in their gas or diesel engines, or are they just kind of like a little amplifier?
Like
You
a
know, how much
decal?
horsepower do you get?
No,
I
that's-
don't know. It is from
Ow.
Ford,
Oh my
so who knows what's real?
yeah. With all the cars
Ouch.
anymore that have speakers to emulate exhaust, it's kind of hard to say. Okay, let's go ahead and get rolling on here. We have a video from Miss Raisa. She shared a video. She was doing some interesting experiments, and well, let's watch the video. She's going to bury a dipole antenna and tell us if it works or not. So here we go. Roll that lovely beam footage.
Not very deep, but underground. In my first video about underground dipole, I tested it directly on the beach of the Baltic Sea, and it was a salt water, and maybe it influenced to my dipole. I was very surprised that even underground my dipole worked very well, and I had even DX stations. Today I am in the forest, as you see, and to make my test even more interesting and useful, I will compare my underground dipole with a normal dipole. This is my normal dipole, 8 meters high. Both dipoles are very good tuned. This is underground dipole, and this is normal dipole. R1BIG дробь Павел.
Борис Иван Галина дробь Павел. Радио первый Борис Иван Галина дробь Павел. Рабочий центр. Здравствуйте, добрый вечер. Вам пятерка девятка 5-9. Меня зовут Гена Геннадий. Китаевич мой кушный. Принято, слушаю вас. Сергей, вы не сесть 5-7. Раиса, как принято на приеме?
Да, Сергей, спасибо за 5-7. И, Сергей, я тут провожу тест небольшой с антеннами. Это антенна положения номер 1, номер 1, номер 1. Положение номер 2, номер 2, номер 2.
И не пойму, то первое положение, то второе.
I am really confused because the difference between two my dipoles, normal and underground dipoles, is very, very small. And sometimes even the underground dipole worked better. I don't know. What is it? Can you explain me?
CQ, hello CQ.
This is underground.
Delta Kilo 1, Papa Yankee. Delta Kilo 1, Papa
Normal
Yankee.
dipole.
Calling. Hello CQ, hello CQ.
The underground dipole has less noise. My dipole number 2 is under the ground. QSL?
Wow, under the ground. You were 5 and 7. 5 and 7 from the dipole, from the underground dipole. Many years ago, I used to work with a piece of wire about 40 meters long, and was located on the grass, in the countryside, on the grass. And with 100 watts, I worked stations from all over the world. Almost unbelievable. But at that time, in the 70s, the propagation was certainly better than right now. That's why maybe propagation helped a lot, as a matter of fact.
Underground dipole, underground dipole, underground dipole. Normal dipole, normal dipole, normal dipole. What do you think, Dieter?
Okay, interesting. Yeah, with normal dipole, you have 2 s-points more.
But my experiment shows that it is possible to use underground antenna. It is amazing, really. And today I am sure that it's possible and that it is not influenced from the salt water. QSL, Dieter?
Roger, Roger. Raisa, yeah. Fantastic that you are so enthusiastic doing all these tests with a different kind of antenna.
QRZ? Y Тамара 1, Николай Мария, добрый вечер, 5-9.
Watching it, I promise. And thank you, Raisa. I can't say enough about how awesome you are. I think I've talked to you on Facebook a couple of times, and it's been wonderful. I appreciate it. Now, the one thing I do want to say as part of my hosting duties is a big thank you to the Hamsters Week Signal group, because without their support, we could not do this show. And Greg absolutely is the one to give all of my ornery comments to, but he is the one that cuts these shows together and makes them at least viewable for everybody. Because we tend to have really good outtakes for our December outtake video. So without further ado, I believe that we have a different kind of show for this month for everybody. We're going to be talking a little bit about some questions. We're going to be trading some information. We're going to do some Q&A with our guests. All right, Greg, what are we up to first?
Well, let's go ahead and let's comment on the video we just watched and get everybody's opinion and thoughts on that and our experiment. And because Andrea will tell all of us we're wrong, let's go ahead and just start with her.
I'm on board. Go for it.
Okay. Well, let's see. I thought it was very interesting, the idea, and it really had not occurred to me. I did go and look at the first video she made mention of, and it was very interesting that the antenna is shorter and she can work contacts. There was not as much A-B contact, comparisons. From what I gleaned on this video, the in-the-air antenna was always sounded louder, and she wasn't showing an S meter, but it always sounded clearer at that point. She did mention there's more noise, but I mean, if you take your RF gain and lower that, you get less noise too. One of the hard measurements that was available there, somebody reported that she was 2 S units better on the antenna in the air versus ground. That is 12 dB, which is about a 10-to-1 power, the difference between 100 watts and a kilowatt. So I did find it interesting. Now, this idea is not a new idea. It turns out that in 1969, the Department of Defense, there was a report from the Rome Air Development Center, Griffiths Air Force Base, New York, wrote a paper. The abstract of that paper, let's see, it was measured performance of HF subsurface dipoles. And the abstract reads, theoretical analysis and measured data are presented for determining the characteristics of high frequency subsurface dipole antennas. The agreement between theory and experimental data is shown to be excellent. So there's actually theory behind this. It is, I'll go through some of this. It is shown that HF subsurface dipoles radiate a surface wave having the same characteristics as that launched by an above ground vertical monopole, and also radiate a space wave which has a pattern identical to that of a half wave horizontal dipole located a quarter wavelength or less above ground. So really that underground, what this is saying is the underground antenna has a very similar pattern to an antenna at about the height that she was talking about here. And I think that's the, oh yeah, the other relevant point here that they make, without getting too crazy technical, is they say the performance on average is approximately 10 dB below that of simple above ground dipoles, which is very consistent with that 12 dB or 2S units. So that's kind of my thoughts and understanding on this subject.
Elijah, what you got?
Yeah, I was wondering about moon bounce. You know how normally with moon bounce, when you use your antenna to fire a VHF, UHF signal or data signal at the moon, it's usually a giant antenna array that has to be like, it's almost like you're building this giant structure that is almost like a giant satellite or television dish, right? But I'm wondering if what's her name? The one that did the Russian person that did that
Raisa.
experiment?
Raisa.
Right. So, yeah. What if she built this whole like underground array where it's like it obviously has to be ground level, so it's going to be flat. So this would be the antenna would be going straight up, it'd be radiating up. But do you think she could actually get a signal to the moon if she did it at the right time and place with the underground invisible antenna, you know?
It would have to be massive.
Mhm. Yeah, like a giant field, like on a farm or something, and just
Uh,
bury a huge thing.
the amount of power and the massiveness of the antenna would be more than anybody's gonna. Maybe a government could pull it off, but
Yeah.
and you know they do have flat, straight up looking, but they're still dishes and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm going to add a little bit onto what Andrea said. The lack of atmospheric noise makes sense with the antenna being quieter for the simple reason we're not getting wind-blown electrical charge. Apparently, we have a very loud train and stuff on there. So, you know, that's going to explain the quieter signal. The part to me, everything seemed perfectly reasonable and believable to me. The part that impressed me was just pure and simple that the system worked. So, you know, people that say they live in an HOA and can't put up an antenna needs to think outside the box, because clearly there's some things that we can do that will work and stuff. And if a direct buried antenna may get a little bit less contacts, maybe down 12 dB, but it still demonstrated quite a bit of ingenuity. I thought it was a cool experiment.
For sure. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, my only comment, my comments on the video, and I did what Andrea did. I went back and I looked at the first one, the one that she did prior to. Because I'm like really naive about a lot of this stuff, it didn't surprise me that there wasn't too much difference with the contacts. And my thoughts on that are, you know, we are electrical beings, and the earth is electrical, and the sky is electrical, and the whole planet, we're just electrical beings. So it doesn't surprise me that something like this can happen.
Yeah, actually, another thing is you can actually generate energy from the earth. And yeah, there's actually mechanisms. They don't commercially exist yet. It's very secretive technology, but you can actually extract energy out of the earth and use it as a power plant.
It's a Nikolai Tesla concept.
Mm-hmm.
My question is twofold. What band was the antenna for? And what was her goal? And also, was she trying to do some kind of NVIS work? I've messed with NVIS antennas for 40 meters, and a lot of what she was talking about with it being, the dBs being lower underground makes sense with NVIS antennas as well. The signal to noise ratio is usually pretty good with NVIS antennas because you don't have the ground noise. Even though the S reading is a little lower, it's still a whole lot cleaner signal because you don't have the ground noise behind it. So I just wondering if she was trying to do some kind of NVIS contacts or skip contacts, you know, long distance.
Well, typically Raisa does 20 meters. So I don't think, and she also is a big DXer, so I don't think NVIS played any part in her test or efforts and stuff. I think it was strictly she wanted to try something, and the one thing I really like about her is when she wants to try something, she goes out and does it. She's had antennas across the lake and everything else.
And I'll confirm, she did say it was 20 meters.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
I was thinking it was pretty interesting, especially back with her first video using it there at the beach with the salt and the sea, obviously. But I guess the big question I had is kind of going with where you said, Greg, in the HOA environment. My concern would be, what about the radiation if you've got this antenna buried in the ground and your neighbors are walking close to it and you're putting out a KW or whatever, you know, that starts to bring some concerns at that point. At least in the air, it's a little bit further removed than their sneakers being 3 or 4 feet away from it.
Yeah.
I would ask, what is my neighbor doing prowling in my backyard?
Well, who says it's technically in your backyard? If you're looking for a long enough stretch in an HOA environment, you may be using your front yard and your backyard.
Or your neighbor's yard.
You could be using your neighbor's yard as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Andrea has a habit of using neighbors' yards.
That was with permission. That was with permission.
Yeah, because like for me, for example, yeah, I'm in an HOA and I'm on a corner lot, so I have 2 sidewalks that pass close to my backyard. You know, so that would be a concern.
I think unless you're standing right on it, I don't think that would be something that would ever be an issue.
I think at that point, I'd be more concerned about the rebar and the sidewalk affecting the signal more than the signal
There
affecting
you go. Yeah, that would be
pedestrians.
that'd be another
But-
director.
Now I'm in Andrea out there in the middle of the night in like a black hat and black clothes digging in the dirt.
So I lived.
Dang it, she's breaking up.
We lost it. Yeah. All right, quick, talk about it.
Melissa needs to pull out her little Andrea face.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. It seems to be working now.
Yeah.
When I was in an apartment, first married, I dropped the coax out the window, and during the night, just like a little slit trench, and ran it about 100 feet into the next complex, and I had a what do you call it, a fan dipole with 160 meters through 10-meter elements on this thing, just strung from tree to tree in that woods. I did not let that apartment, and my little trick for digging.
I told you.
If you just snag the grass, drop it in and down real quick that way.
I'm just registering the "I told you so" because I called that one.
Yeah, one question about HF, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know how usually you always have a special antenna for HF, right? And 50 megahertz, you always have, for international communication, you always have a special antenna that's going to be bigger than the other ones, of course, a lot of times. But can you do medium frequency? And I know medium frequency is like the 1.2 to 2 megahertz. Uh, it's like that's the bottom, like the rock bottom of the amateur radio bands. Um, could you do that with an HF antenna, from 1 to 2 megahertz?
It'd have to be the third harmonic for it to resonate.
Yeah, just like a slight modification to an HF antenna to do 2 megahertz or something like that.
Normally, you need to get the length. So 1.2 megahertz, you're not really going to. Amateur band lowest is 1.8, unless we get into 20. What is it? 630 and 2200 meters. But for 160 meters, that's what, a 240-foot long dipole, something like that. And you can shorten those with coils. You can run it zigzag, and just off of Raisa's video there, bury it in the ground, which in her first video, she noted that the antenna was half the length. And that was another thing in that report. It said antennas were reduced by 1/3 or 2/3 their length of being above ground.
Yeah.
So, but the real trick a lot of people running HF have or difficulty is trying to use, like, say, a 40-meter antenna on 80 meters. This is a common one because 40 meters aren't too crazy big, but 80 gets pretty big. And so a lot of people try and run antenna tuners, and it's a very inefficient trying to go to a longer wavelength on a smaller antenna. Going the reverse direction is a lot more efficient. So you need to get it electrically longer somehow. And fortunately, coils, you can do that, loading coils. There's all kinds of tricks right at the antennas. I personally like to bend them and use and zigzagging them. If you've seen a cobweb antenna, that's just
Yeah,
the dipole kind of folded up.
Right. Yeah. So with HF, you can easily predict what time, based on your location, you can predict what time you're going to be able to use certain bands. So you know which HF frequency, which one is appropriate for which time, right? But when it comes to medium frequency, how would you do that?
It's still pretty much, I mean, day-to-day variations are very large, and depending upon where you are in the solar cycle, of course, that varies too. It's, as a general trend, you understand. And one thing I like, the last trough we were in, a lot of people complain about propagation. But if you're somebody that like getting on 160 meters or 80 meters, the other bands would close at night, and you want to be near the maximum usable frequency. So when the maximum usable frequency gets down to 4 megahertz or something, your 80 meters is working at the best it ever works. And so I'm going a little bit off there, but yeah, you can sort of predict that. And in that kind of cases, there were times the 80 meters would even close and you'd have to go to 160. So this is why AM broadcast stations in the US here, where those are in the medium wave, I guess, their propagation extends out at night because the maximum usable frequency drops down. And as you get closer to the maximum usable frequency, there's less noise. And you get refraction rather than absorption.
Right. Yeah. One thing with AM broadcast is, since it's even lower than 1 megahertz, you could easily get, not only, like, if I was like here in San Antonio, but then I went to Dallas, I could easily pick up an AM station from here in San Antonio, or even across the country if you had the right antenna, right? If you had the proper antenna set up in a receiver.
Mhm.
and you didn't have a competing signal on the band. Yeah, I
Mhm.
miss those days a little bit, because what kills you on AM right now is all the power converters, all that making RFI that interferes, and a lot of them have reduced their power to save money.
But you could, even
They
though they reduce power, though, if I was on the other side of the world and I had a humongous antenna, I could possibly still get a signal from the US, from the opposite side of the world. It's just because it's medium frequency, it can travel internationally, obviously. So it makes sense that AM broadcast would be just like HF.
You can have a lot of fun on just your regular AM radio. Get on there about midnight, 1 o'clock, and DX AM stations. If you can find some that are clear of other frequencies in the local area, you can pick up stations a few hundred to 1,000 miles away at times.
Yeah, and even that's just with a standard AM receiver coil, just like the little one that you find inside a radio. You don't need some big array or something, just a little coil.
Well, the bigger the antenna, the bigger the signal.
Yeah, you still be able to get it though with a little coil at midnight.
The bigger the antenna, the bigger the signal. That little antenna in there is going to go. Any other thoughts or anything on Raisa's video before we kind of shift topics? Okay, I'm going to throw something before I throw it back over to Sam. I don't know if everybody can see that.
Yeah, I can.
There we go. I am a big, well, it is kind of panning out. I am a big fan of Radcom magazine. If you subscribe, if you're part of the ARL to get QST, or you subscribe to and hope someday to actually see a CQ magazine and stuff, I really recommend that you do this. I'm not a member of the Great Radio Society of Great Britain because I have any desire to be part of that. I just wanted the magazine. I've been now a member, a subscriber for 7 years, and I love it. It's got a lot of good technical articles in it. The nice thing is that they cover multiple topics. Every issue they cover kit building, HF, VHF, UHF, microwave, digital modes and stuff. There's an article on every topic every month. So if you're looking for something that's got a lot of good articles, technical and stuff, check them out. They're a pretty good magazine, and I enjoy the heck out of them.
Yeah, I actually I have a subscription to HRO because I've ordered from them, so I get free magazines from HRO.
Yeah, well, that's a part catalog. I'm actually talking, and that's the other thing. You get away from QST, you get less part catalogs. I think 90% of their magazines now ads on that. But and Miss Andrea, you threw me into a jealous rage last month. I cried myself to sleep for 3 days, and my wife said, "Will you quit pouting and take care of it?" So I have the antennas. I've got the RF box up on the tower. I got to feed it into the shack, and then I will be good to go. So thanks to you, I'm now broke.
Now you're going to say what you are broke with?
A 905 with the 10 gig. So I looked at you unboxing that last month. I cried myself to sleep. I couldn't emotionally handle it. I looked to see if anybody wanted to buy any of my kids, but nobody did. So we'll retire in 4 more years.
It's easy to
For
sell
the fourth
kids
time,
Right.
On that. All right. Well, let's go ahead and switch it over to Samantha, and we'll go ahead and do some question answers. Anybody can come up with anything they want to talk about, any questions and everything. One of the things I'd like to see is when you come up with your questions and stuff, I'd like to see how come you got into ham radio. You know, I know why I got into it. I think I know why Melissa got into it. Andrea got into it to make me spend money. and Sam got into it so she could come on here and drive me nuts.
Hey, absolutely.
Huh? So let's see why some of you the other guys got in. So Sam, go ahead and take her away, please.
So the point of contention, first of all, is the fact that once again you have the moon, which I understand there's a tie-in with Raisa's video, but you know what I think your background should be. You need to bring back Fred. So I am highly disappointed if you don't get Fred back on that screen before the end of this show. So, all right, to all of our guests, we are doing the open question segment. And what we'd like to do is, if you already have a question in mind, that's fine. And you know, Greg wants to know why you got into ham radio to begin with. But what we're also looking at is what segments are you looking forward to seeing our show do in the future moving forward? So I think Greg can see if you go ahead and put your hit the raise hand button if you have your question already ready. And then we'll have Greg call out whoever he sees, because I'm doing this on a phone and I can't see everybody right now. So Greg, if you'll keep an eye out for the little raised hands, and then just pick somebody and we'll roll with their question and why they got into ham radio.
Right. JD, come on down. You know, I'm trying to get you to notice something here.
I see.
All right. JD, take her away.
Well, the reason I got into ham radio is because I'm part of the Federal Witness Protection Program, and they have to keep me in an undisclosed location. So this is my only method of communication. So, so a couple of thoughts about ham radio, and I just wrote down, and I wanted to get an opinion of the other participants of what's really important in station construction, and it also goes to a desire of what I would like to see in terms of content in Ham Talk, which is segments on the technical construction side of a high efficiency amateur radio station. But I wrote down 4 items that I think are important. I wanted to see if my order of importance has a consensus with everybody else in terms of getting a good signal out. And I wrote down in order: 1, coax and connectors; 2, the antenna; 3, the amount of power you're putting out; and 4, your radio as the very last item. I just wanted to see if that was a sequence that has agreement or disagreement, and why.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and kind of respond to that one. I agree with your list. The only thing that I place less importance on is the amplifier. Until your feed line, your antenna, and everything are matched and you've got good signal coming in, if you can't hear it, you're not going to be able to work it. So it does no good to have. We've got a guy in this locale who remain nameless, but he runs 400 or 500 watts of power, but he's deaf. He's putting his call out. He'll get on 5.2, he'll call CQ for hours, and there'll be 70 stations answering him, but he can't hear them because his antenna is about 25 feet off the ground. It's not a high gain antenna to begin with, and his coax is not low loss. But he subscribes to the theory, more power, better contacts. And, when you point out to him that there are 8 stations coming back to him and he can't hear any of them, it is always their fault because they should run more power. So the amplifier should be the last aspect that you add to your station, and you should match it somewhat. To me, an amplifier is to help get you heard in a pileup and stuff like that. But as you and I have demonstrated, JD, we're almost 300 miles. We're what, 286? We've dialed the power way down and still been able to communicate. But we didn't find each other without making a lot of noise first. So, you know, that's my theory. And I can see Andrea's just biting at the bit to argue with him.
Yeah, I really don't have much to add on that. I would agree, antenna and coax, because you need the signal both ways. Amplifier second after, you know, comes after radio. Like you said, if you run an amplifier, it's good for beginners for sure. But if you're going to run an amplifier, you should expect people not running it are going to respond to you, which means you really prepare yourself to.
I might have lost Andrea.
Yeah.
Hey, Andrea.
Andrea needs an amplifier.
Hey, Andrea.
She needs bandwidth.
You
Peter.
freezing up.
Any better now?
Actually, why don't you try turning your video off, but leave the mic on and see if that cuts down on your upload bandwidth.
Yeah, well.
Here's a technical resolution.
Well, I'll just say that on the radio, the receiver is the most important part of it. So you're able to hear the person you're referring to, Greg. It wouldn't surprise me if they have their squelch up. And I know operating mobile, I have a fairly good receiver because I'm using a weak signal rig. So when I'm on FM, I got a better receiver, but I open my squelch up. I'm running 150 watt. I'm expecting people to run 50 or 30 or 20, 25 watts. And usually I can copy them a lot longer than they're able to copy me. That's because they haven't opened their squelch up and then it starts to chop me out. So.
Yeah, on my weak signal station on sideband CW, I always assume the other station's running between 300 to 600 watts. And then on FM, I usually assume 50 to 100. And so I kind of tailor my ability to receive based on that aspect. And also a lot of them are mobile radios. So I try to work on that.
I think it's a good consensus. I've got a second question, and it's simply this: what is the best band or frequency and hardware setup for moon bounce on a budget? Or is that an oxymoron to say
ham radio in a budget is an oxymoron?
You're right. I withdraw the question.
I'm going to respond to that question though, JD, so you can't withdraw it. If you're going to do digital modes, then I would say the easiest to get on is 2 meters with a good 16 to 17 element Yagi, about 300 watts and some digital modes. If you can put up a small dish, about 4 meters, 3 to 4 meters in size, and you can get about 100 watts, 1296 has the potential where you can actually, I have gotten my voice bouncing back on with less than 150 watts on 1296. And I've gotten my CW signal to bounce back. So I have not made a voice contact yet on moon bounce, but I am getting my echoes back. So if my echoes are coming back, they're getting out there. I just got to get coordinated with somebody to do the contact. So 1296 is relatively easy if you got room for a small dish. And they even make a portable dish that, like an umbrella, just folds out and you point it to the sky and you're all set.
1.2 gigahertz is definitely, in terms of system size, the easiest to manage. And a couple 100 watts, 300-watt amplifier. You run digital modes on that, and it's not so common in the US, but very common in Europe. People that runs also on 70 centimeters. The problem with 1.2 gigs, most people have to gear up entirely for that band, whereas 2 meters or 70 centimeters, more people have some amount of hardware. A large single Yagi will talk to big stations on 2 meters. On 70 centimeters, I've heard people working a little easier there.
You know,
So it's not one.
Last question is International Space Station comms. Similar question. What is the best quickly deployable setup for comms back and forth to the ISS?
The few times I've done it, it's all been on 2 meters, but that's been about 4 years. I believe they've changed some things. I haven't even looked into that, but the contacts we made were from the house, 2 meters with a Tram 1481 at the time. So
is that a handheld Yagi you're using, or
no? That's a ground plane, omnidirectional ground plane for your house.
It wasn't circular polarized, it was vertical?
Yeah, it was just a vertical standard, same antenna I talked to everybody simplex on at the time. Dual band.
Upper shift problem.
I'm wondering if next time you have astronauts on the moon, you know how they normally have the RF link to communicate with HQ. Well, I'm wondering if they had an additional antenna and radio system, they could talk back and forth via VHF to amateurs, you know?
They could, but that'll never happen in our lifetime. They got a lot better things to do when they're on the moon.
It's also a lot more challenging than the average ham realizes, because a lot of people think, well, the moon is line of sight, but the path loss is quite high. And even though EME, you've got the bounce and return, you still have quite a bit of path loss to deal with there. So it's not going to be like, you know, a small antenna to the ISS, which is tremendously closer. I mean, I don't know what the distance to ISS is, but it's no more than a few hundred. Well, laterally, maybe you're talking 1,000 miles, whereas the moon is 230,000 miles.
Yeah, every time we've picked up the International Space Station, they were just coming over Oregon, and we'd lose them just south of Brazil for talking here. But we've only made that contact like 3 times. I think Ruth made it a couple times. I made it a couple. And I did do one from my mobile one time. But again, nothing I've done with the space station's been in the last 4 or 5 years. Well, thank you, JD. Anybody want to go next?
I'll go next, but I have to ask a question first.
That's right.
How do you raise your hand in here? I was looking all around for these little icons to raise a hand. I don't see it.
It's called reactions.
Yeah, look for reactions and then do a raised hand.
Yeah, on the
All right, I'll have
bottom
to check
bottom
that
of your
out.
screen.
You can also do this.
Yeah, this
Yeah, I
works.
can
you
do
know.
that. Oh yeah, there's reactions. I don't think I looked under there yet. It looked too it looked like the wrong place.
Yeah, reactions, and it says raise hand. It's
Now
like
I forgot what I was going to say, but I will say that I was kind of amused. I don't know what our viewers see right now, or when you were talking, Greg. Actually, it wasn't you, Greg. It was Sam. And so while Sam was talking, you reached behind you, probably to get that magazine. I'm not sure, but what I saw was you reaching to the moon to grab something and bring it forward. I thought that was kind of cool.
I actually reached back to turn the radio down because there's a net that we do here, and it was fixing to start, and I didn't need it blasting all over here. and my radio.
Yeah, I forgot my alarm went off.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna be doing the 7 o'clock Monday net after this, right?
Nope.
No, okay.
Because it's 7 now.
Yeah.
It
Oh.
it would have been after it if Greg was on time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Blame Greg. It always comes back to Greg's at fault.
There is that.
But this time you can't argue it.
Yeah, you can't argue this one, Greg. Sorry, we got you on that.
You know.
More witnesses than me.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and since I took that cheap shot, I'll go ahead and jump in there. As far as getting into ham radio, my father was a licensed radio operator, and so it was just something that interested me. I did a lot with public service. I had a law enforcement background in college, so it was just kind of a natural progression. And prior to moving to San Antonio, I was emergency communications coordinator for the county that I lived in, closer to the Gulf. So I got to experience quite a few deployments for Rita and Ike, and spent time doing that. And so that was kind of my draw. And now that I've moved out to San Antonio, I swore I was never going to get that involved again in camping out at the courthouse like I did for a week or more during those hurricanes. But I've definitely gotten involved with some of the public service events. Maybe not as much for the emergency communications, though.
Okay.
And as far as the question, I don't have one at the moment. So,
Okay. Anybody else got a question?
but we lost Sam.
We lost Sam.
Tom's got a question. Yeah, she froze up and dropped off, so she ought to come back here in a second.
Yeah,
Tom?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
all right, I got a big question. And as far as setting up a good station, my big thing is tossing between good coax and hooking up to antennas directly with good connectors and adapters, or just a good connector. And then how good of a connector do I need, and what type of connector do I need for even the HF bands? And some people are talking about what do you call it, attenuation between connectors and your coax. Well, how much what is the theoretical attenuation you can achieve or expect on a good station, I guess?
Well, the biggest thing, and that's an interesting question, and I actually have plans for a future segment where I'm going to go over all of that. What we're looking at is some things, but everything adds up, Tom. You're looking at your loss on your feed line. You got insertion loss. Now, the insertion loss may be minuscule, but by the time you add up a watt meter, a pass through to get outside to the shack from your window, lightning arrestor, antenna, relay, antenna switch, and stuff, you can add up pretty quick. Marshall K5QE told me one time many years ago when I was first getting into VHF, UHF, I was still in my infancy there. Went down to visit him and his shack, and that's a treat. But he told me that I should always stay 1 dB or less. So I've, being me, took that to the extreme and translated that to mean and less. So, you know, I really reduce my my losses through the feed line, and I minimize my losses. I also don't cheap out on the connectors. You go and buy these $5 connectors at Altex or off of HRO and things like that, and they're lossy. They also, especially on VHF, UHF, if you start running high power, I had some that I picked up from KCOM years ago, before I knew anything, and I was running 1200 watts during one of our sideband nets, and all of a sudden I had sparks flying and everything, and it had melted the connector on the back of the amp. There's a lot of heat generated when you get up to the VHF, UHF frequencies and you're running power.
Yeah, and when you do that, on your radio equipment, the best thing to do is to get some like big copper heat sink or cooling tubes, and then have like a blower fan that has a very high CFM rating, and then just keep it going, to keep the
That's
air.
not going to do anything for your connectors.
No.
We're not talking the radio or the amp or anything. At the time I ran a Henry amp, there's nothing that cools a Henry amp.
No, Henry's got about the biggest blower you can stick on an amp, and
it will turn on. I have had my ham shack in the dead of winter and running one of my Henrys or two or three of the Henrys, and had to turn on the window air conditioner for the shack.
Cool.
It's ridiculous how much heat those put out. My
and I imagine a connector would heat up faster than a fan can keep up.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I've seen connectors melt exactly like you're talking, Greg. Especially with the cheaper connectors.
Or just try using like liquid nitrogen cooling through a tube,
Yeah, again, we're not talking the amp cooling, we're talking the connectors and the cable.
Yeah, you could just create some kind of device that keeps those components cool on the cable,
Yeah, it's better, it's cheaper and easier and less complicated to just buy better quality parts.
Can I make an unsolicited and uncompensated product recommendation?
Yeah.
In terms of coax, something I found at the Dayton Ham Fest about 5 years ago is Messi and Paoloni, MESSI, and Paoloni, PAOLONI coax, and they also have their own built-in connectors. And if you don't want to, buy them pre-assembled, which I do for everything, including jumpers, you can get, of course, Amphenol connectors, which I think are probably what Greg's referring to as a high quality connector that will handle the wattage and the heat very effectively. So that's just an uncompensated product endorsement, if I may.
I'm going to agree with your endorsement, sir. That cable is very low loss if you go with the Ultraflex 13/500. It's extremely low loss for coax and very flexible. I mean, it flexes like nobody's business, and the connectors are very high quality. Every jumper in my shack is their cable, and then the rotor loop jumpers are also their cable to the hardline and on all my antennas.
Now, I'm going to counter that a little bit. I use MMP Hyperflex 13 for my 2.4 gig and 3.4 gig feeds on my mobile. And while the connectors are nice, the cable is nice, it's got something in the weathering of it. It's getting eaten. It looks like they don't have, and maybe there's a little bit difference between the Ultraflex and the Hyperflex. I've exchanged some emails and they haven't given me an answer. They weren't at the last Hamvention for me to talk to them, but it looks like they don't have a mold inhibitor on it, and so the outer part of the jacket has something growing on it.
Could that be due to your road salt up in New Jersey?
Things generally don't like to grow with salt. Now, honestly, they do spread some pre-treatment, which apparently is a syrup base, so sugar base.
A beet juice. Yeah, they use a lot of beet juice.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, it could be from that, but you know what? My Times Microwave LMR 400 doesn't have any of that stuff going on.
Well, the reason I ask is because none of my cables here at the house, Messi and Poloni, have had any kind of coloration or decay appearance. And I run it on 2 of my antennas on my truck, and I've not noticed anything. But the only difference is we don't have them running around salting roads here. We get 2 days a year that we get a frozen road.
I was also wondering if the highway driven vehicle, if it's get little bits of teeny tiny bits of debris. Now, obviously, you just said that your Times LMR 400 it's not subject to that or susceptible to it, but maybe that playing into it also with the other cable.
It certainly could be, several factors coming in there. It's just my observation, and it's definitely much worse than the LMR. You can look at it. I actually run some 9913, and Belden 9913. That jacket doesn't weather nearly as well as the LMR 400 jacket.
But the LMR 400 is also a hard shell type jacket too, so that might help. Or at least
actually,
the Ultraflex or
I'm using the high flex LMR 400, so it's actually very more rubber like than the plastic on the MMP or the Belden.
Okay, well, ladies and gents, we lost Sam, so apparently her internet connection dropped.
No, I texted her and she said her phone overheated and shut down.
Okay. Well, that will do it too.
She's
So
running too much power.
We'll go ahead and see, there we were talking about running too much power, and she's using a repeater. So we'll go ahead and wrap everything up. We've pretty much hit our limit. Anybody on our guest have any final questions or comments? Anything in particular you guys would like to see on future shows?
I have one.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know how you have RIDI and data over things like HF, where you can just transfer files freely, whatever, as long as you transmit your call sign. I'm wondering if you could use the internet protocol or IP based transfers. So you're basically creating internet broadband over HF from country to country instead of just putting in a data file and just transferring it normally with normal protocols.
I don't think the
broad
would be broad enough.
It's been done. I mean, IPs was run on the packet networks back in the 90s, even the late 80s, but and maybe it's still run. There's some higher speed data, and I'm pretty sure that's what's run in the what's the mesh network stuff these days, is basically whatever the physical transport is, the upper transport is internet protocols. In fact, I know the mesh networks, they can link that into the regular internet.
That's not running on HF though, is it?
It's
up on UHF.
So with respect to content for your shows, I'm kind of a gearhead, and I always like to get product recommendations that people like. This is a Breedlove mount, Breedlove, I think .com. And if you're looking for something that's kind of out of the ordinary but very high quality to mount on vehicles and other things, I'd suggest you take a peek at their website, and it's just really high quality stuff. A little pricey, but you get what you pay for.
That's breedlovemounts.com.
Yeah, thank you. Breedlovemounts.com. You're correct.
I
And
have
Greg, go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was gonna come in with a question / suggestion for content, but if you've got a question that's related to what was said, I'd yield.
Nope, I was going down the same road you were, so go ahead and then I'll jump in.
Well, I would say that one of the ways that I found this channel was I was specifically looking for rover content when I kind of fell off into the deep end of contest roving, I suppose. And so I found Andrea's stuff, and that got me here. But one of the reasons I don't watch more, it could be because I've got a short attention span. I like drag racing better than NASCAR. And so I wonder if you might get, I mean, you do get views on your channel, but not initially, which is why I didn't think that I made the cut, because I watched you a day or two after the fact, and which you, as you said, people didn't watch to the end. So I was surprised that it even was number 3, much less number 20 or something. Anyway, where I'm going is, have you ever considered shorter form, or perhaps putting chapters in these videos after they're done? That way people can click right to what they're interested
Right.
in.
Right.
We hadn't considered
Yeah.
chapters, but we have tossed around a shorter format. The biggest problem is we have a hard time staying within 1 hour.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
YouTube Studio UI offers a lot of tools for videos, whether live streaming or already pre-recorded. So you might want to check out the YouTube Studio in the account settings, you know.
Here's on the table. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I think that would be really helpful for people, like when they're going through our show and we have 2, 3, or 4 segments, to have those markers in there so that people know, you know, they can just click right to it.
Yeah, and also little annotations. So it's like a little information
Yeah.
thing that just pops up.
Well, we can
Yeah.
start.
Oh, yeah. Those are called
Just
cards. So
indicate.
adding the cards.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I'll look into that, Scott, as far as markers and stuff. We usually try to have 2 to 3 segments to cover something for everybody, so that every show is of interest for them. But I do like the idea of putting markers and identifying. So,
Well, yeah, and I understand that, you know, you've got the 1 hour format because you can't get together all the time. But then once you see it, in fact, earlier in this show, you were saying that Sam needed to go through and watch the content. Well, that's a perfect time when you're rewatching to then mark where the times are, and then you just edit your description, contents, or whatever, and you throw it in there, and it'll automatically put these little chapters at the bottom of the video. And I think it'd be really helpful for somebody who doesn't, maybe they don't care about rover operations, but they're very interested in moon bounce. They could just look and see exactly where moon bounce starts and click it and go and watch that little 20-minute segment without committing to the whole hour to figure out where it is.
you know what? You just gave Melissa more chores.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe for the hamster group, that's the official name, that's the official main name of this group, right? It's hamster group.
Yes.
Okay.
They're a weak signal group.
Right. Do you think you could create like an Instagram page, or even use YouTube Shorts for like small short videos and photos about the projects we work on, maybe?
Does YouTube if Greg posted something really short, like less than 10 minutes,
Yeah.
wouldn't YouTube automatically put that in a short or a reel, or no?
No, you have to use
No.
YouTube Shorts, which is
Okay.
the mobile orientation video, not the landscape.
Yeah, they do it all wrong. It's incorrectly at portrait instead of landscape. So yeah, I don't even do that on my own channel very much.
Mhm.
Cool.
Well, speaking of going over, we've already run over by about
Yeah.
10 minutes on the show. So this is an hour and 10-minute show this month. It's very easy for us to do that. We tend to have people that like to talk. Yes, ma'am.
Did we pick up Bryce's comment?
No, I was just going to let Greg ramble on and then throw it in towards the end.
Go ahead, Bryce. Sorry about that.
No, not a problem. I was just going to kind of build
Free
on what
Bryce.
JD was talking about with the content ideas, things to build on for your shack. Maybe have a whole segment on grounding. A lot of people don't
Okay.
understand grounding. And then obviously, yeah, the whole thing with antennas and feed lines and that sort of stuff. Have some of the segments focusing on one particular technical area to help provide that skill, because I think that's one of the things in the ham community that we lack, is that we don't pass that information on to the younger groups. The younger groups don't seem to want to get into it. Obviously, with all the preppers and all of that, there's been a resurgence in the ham community, but a lot of the younger ones don't want to go ask an Elmer. But if they can find that video content, they'll watch that over finding Greg and asking you directly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and go over that. I appreciate two things. Number one, all you guys joining us. It's a little bit different format. It was a little rough start, but I think we moved on pretty good there once we got going. We may do something similar to this in the future there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say we're going to wrap her up today. Melissa, any final?
No, I just want to thank everybody for your time and connecting with us. It's been fun.
I've enjoyed it.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back anytime.
All right. Well, we appreciate you all joining us. Miss Andrea?
Thanks for allowing us to come in.
Again, I just want to thank you all for coming here today. It's been our pleasure to have you here with us and get your feedback and your comments and contribution.
And we're going to find out how many friends you all have by how fast our viewership goes up.
Good luck.
All
with
right.
All right. 73s, everybody. Have a good
All
night.
right. Bye.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.